Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. This is your host, Cristi Habermann. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I started the Grieving Insomniacs podcast in the fall of 2021. I had to get used to recording and then play it back. And I had to get used to hearing my own voice without judgment. It's a pretty hard thing to do. And then I published my first episode in February of 2022. I'm up to 94 episodes. So I'm pretty appreciative of that. Having said that, if this is your first time here, I wanted to let you know that in 2011, my son died. I was a licensed counselor in mental health. I had 10 years of experience in counseling people. And my son dying rocked my world. But secondary to my son dying was the fact that I lost a lot of support. After the initial shock of my son dying, my friends disappeared, family disappeared, and I was alone. And it was a scary time. I was talking to perfect strangers at the gym, at work, and I just didn't have anyone to talk to. And I was like, how come my school, all my years of counseling, how come I didn't know that this is what it would be like? And back in 2011, there were not a lot of podcasts. Instagram was just coming to fruition. There were some Facebook groups. I'm not really one to put myself out there, especially in the beginning. I was just like a wounded animal. And I knew then that part of my purpose and part of Christopher dying was the realization that I have to talk about it. And I've always been the person that believes that it's important that we talk about it. And if you expect other people to talk about it, you have to be willing to talk about it yourself. So I'm in a professional setting, so I really can't talk about it in a professional setting. This podcast is a hobby podcast. It is not a podcast about how to do it. It absolutely is not, because I don't believe there's a how to do it. I believe that each person has to do it on their own. We can support each other through the journey, but we can't do it for you. And there's no guides, there's no techniques that are going to make it better. Each person has to find their way. I started this podcast to talk about it. So all day today, I've been going back and forth about what am I going to talk about today? I want to get back to a weekly podcasting episode, but what do I want to talk about? My husband gave me a few suggestions, but as I've gone through the day, I've realized that pretty irritable. It was a really tough week at work. For those of you just listening to the podcast, I'm recovering from cancer. And I think now that the treatment is over, right as the holidays start, I'm realizing that, oh yeah, this is when the winter blues, or the grief blues, if you want to call it that way, are starting. For me, it starts right after Halloween. We are big Halloween people in our family. It was one of my favorite holidays. I came from a family that the holidays caused a lot of stress. We were in poverty, didn't have a lot of money for food, didn't have a lot of money for Christmas. When she was stressed, Halloween is the stress-free holiday. And we go full on out. Still, even though our children are grown and out of the house, we have grandchildren now. One of our grandchild has actually moved out of the Halloween stage too. He's 16 years old. Halloween's a little bittersweet. The other holiday that we celebrated a lot was Veterans Day, especially when we lived in California. And every year we'd go to Knott's Berry Farm, because on Knott's Berry Farm, the fee was free. We could afford to go. We'd stay in a hotel. We'd do early mornings at Knott's Berry Farm. It was a really good time. I realized today that my grief blues are kicking in because I really miss Chris. It just hurts sometimes. And then after having a tough week, I think I'm feeling especially vulnerable right now because of the tough week at work. I'm just not getting to where I used to be before I found out I had cancer. In all honesty, 2024 has not been good to me. I'm sitting here thinking about how I can escape my grief for the holidays. I wanted to go away. I live in South Dakota. I thought, I'll go to Denver. Or maybe I'll go to Sioux Falls, like just away, so I could avoid the pressures of who's going to come, who's not going to come. One of my very first episodes was about the first Thanksgiving after my son died. It's quite a sad, sad story. I feel bad for recording it, but at the same time, it's my story. And I honestly believe that if you didn't want me talking about it, you should have treated me better. Like, it was traumatic, very traumatic. I was alone for the first Thanksgiving after Christopher died. Do I have an explanation for why I was alone? Besides, I was incredibly sad and depressed. Each year, that gets replayed a little bit. A couple of years back, was it 5? 4 years? It was after COVID. So maybe 21, 22. I decided that I am not going to worry about who gets along with who, and I'm just going to invite people to my house for Thanksgiving or Christmas. If I didn't, no one would be here. In fact, my stepmother actually came out and said to me that it is now the children's turn to have the holidays because she's done. I promise you that when my kids and my grandkids are in their 20s and their 30s, if I'm able to live that long, I am not going to tell my grandchildren or children that. I would give anything to have Christopher and his kids show up at my door for Thanksgiving or Christmas. Anything. Just anything. And it makes me so incredibly sad that he won't be here. She hasn't said anything along those lines this year. I'm like, why am I so irritable and grouchy? It's because the holidays are coming up. And I forget. I'm so focused on the job. I'm so focused on other things. I honestly think I forgot how bad it is over the holidays. Whether this is your first Thanksgiving without your family and your loved one, or whether this is like mine, which is the 13th. Yeah, it's tough. What do we have to do? We have to acknowledge that it's tough. None of this fake stuff. I believe that part of the problem with grief is that we fake it till we make it. And that's fine when you go to work in a professional environment. You have to fake it till you make it. Get it. Totally get it. At home, though, with your family and your friends, you shouldn't have to fake it till you make it. Understand, people are reacting to you when you are sad because it makes them feel uncomfortable. It's not about how you feel. It's not about you at all. And that is something that I think as grievers that it's hard for us to reconcile. Because especially as women, we are told we're not supposed to have feelings now. We're supposed to take care of other people. We're not supposed to take care of ourselves. You have to take care of yourself. And that starts with self-care and acknowledge. For me, I need to acknowledge that probably going to Denver is not in the cards for me, just because I'm really struggling physically. Even though I'm done with all my cancer treatments, I am just, for whatever reason, struggling. The other thing is I don't try to take care of everyone. Maybe you just need to be alone. The the first year, like after all the drama with my dad. So let me explain real quick. And then go back and listen to the full story about what happened that first Thanksgiving. I was working a second job. I was just getting my counseling practice off the ground. I had time to grieve. That was the first thing. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I was at my dad's house. My dad was there. My stepmom was there. My stepsister was there. Her children were there. She had 2 teen boys. Yvonne, who's my stepmom, best friend, her husband had died shortly after Christopher. He goes, anyway, she was going to be alone too. Desiree and Yvonne are talking about what they're doing for Christmas in front of me and my husband. Or Thanksgiving, sorry. They were talking about Thanksgiving in front of us. Desiree says, how are we going to get all these people around the table? They pull out a tape measure and they're measuring the table. Nothing is said to me or my husband about, what are your Thanksgiving plans? Would you like to join us for Thanksgiving? Nothing. All of this planning is going on around us. And I realized, hey, it's time to go. And I got in the car and I cried my eyes out. And my husband says, why? Why do you continue to put yourself through this? And I was like, they're all I got. My dad's all I got. I've been estranged from my mom by her choice, not mine. He's all I got. My husband was just appalled. My other son went to his in-laws' house. The first Thanksgiving alone. I volunteered to work that day at my convenience store job so that people that had families could be with their families, because I couldn't tolerate being. And if I would have had my way, I would not have had Thanksgiving. But my husband insisted. I'm like, fine, do it all. And he did. He absolutely did. So there's more to the story. But if you want to hear more, listen to the episode called The First Thanksgiving. It's quite sad. If you wait till after Thanksgiving to listen to it. But anyway, so that's the story of my first Thanksgiving. Continuing on like that for a few years, though. I've been alone on Thanksgiving more than I have been with people for Thanksgiving. And it's not like you can go to someone else's house, right? They all have family. Don't want to be invited to strangers' house. It's just, I just don't even, even now, I get teary-eyed and all of that. The first November, that anxiety spikes. And I'm like, where am I going to go? Who's going to invite me? Or actually, the worry is, who's not going to invite me? How do I need to behave? Do I need to not be sad so I get invited? Or do I need to be, what do I need to do so I can be included? Most of the time, I was probably better off not being included, especially those first few years. If you need to, take the day. I stay in bed. That's where I get my safety. That's where I get my security. I just stay in bed. And I just miss Chris. As the farther along I got in my grief, the more I'd start to interact in the world. But gradually, I just cannot emphasize gradually. If you can only handle being out in public among other people for an hour, don't overcommit yourself on Thanksgiving to the whole day. I can't even explain to you how hard it is. I'm thinking about the simplest things, right? And I want people to really understand this. My son died June. It was June 19th. I don't remember why. We were celebrating someone's birthday at my cousin's house. I don't know whose birthday it was. I don't remember. I remember my brother being there, my sister being there. This is probably the last time I interacted with my cousin in any normal way. It was that same week of Christopher's funeral. And why they decided that, I don't know. I just cannot even explain why they thought a birthday party would be good just a couple of days after a funeral. I went there and I wanted to be with my family, my brother, my sister, my cousins, my aunt, like it's family gathering. We put out the cake. We sing happy birthday. I still don't know whose birthday it was. And I looked in that birthday cake and I realized that Christopher will never sit around that table with us. He will never celebrate another birthday. My cousin told me my face went white and I had to leave. I had to leave. Like that moment, I was gone and out the door. It was a birthday party, but I was devastated. And I couldn't function. I just couldn't function. Thanksgiving is the same, right? Like everyone's around the table. The family's around the table. On a good day, maybe it won't hit you as hard that your child is not around the table. But when people start talking about what the year has been like, especially when it's people that you haven't talked to for 6 months or more, and they're talking about how good things are with their kids, and you realize you have nothing to say because your kid is dead. Those are the kind of things that grieving people experience, especially around the holidays, because nothing makes you feel more alone than knowing that someone you love is not there. And it is incredibly, incredibly sad. First rule of thumb, take care of yourself. My self-care is going to start now. I'm going to quit giving myself a hard time about I'm trying to lose weight. Have to lose weight because that's part of what caused my cancer. Came from shame-based parenting, so the way we motivate ourselves when we're shame-based parent is talking bad about ourselves. Got to change that self-talk. Got to change that. I'm going to quit worrying about who's coming to my house and who's not coming to my house. You get the invite. If you show, you show. If you don't, you don't. I'm not taking care of other people's feelings anymore. At work, I'm going to take steps to take care of myself there also. I have a new supervisor that's struggling in her role. That is no longer going to be my problem. I think it's important to understand when you're dealing with other people is to understand that the world doesn't operate the way we want it to operate. Right? Because the world operated the way that I wanted it to operate. Christopher wouldn't be dead. Everyone would be ethical and trustworthy. We'd make right decisions. We wouldn't harm other people. Like those are some true tenets of what I believe, and do no harm is a big one. And it's not because, well, it might be because I'm a counselor and that gets drilled into your head that you do no harm. I mean, that might be part of it, but ethically at the core of me, that's what that is about. Don't put yourself out there if you don't have to. Don't overcommit. Just because you're the family that everybody came to for Thanksgiving, if you don't feel like it this year, don't do it. It is okay to opt out in the interest of self-care. Commit for an hour, commit to a side dish, not to the whole meal. Or just completely opt out. Nobody said we have to celebrate the holidays. No rule book that says, hey, we have to celebrate the holidays this year. Throw the rule book out. The rule book that existed when your child alive is now gone. And it's time to make new rules. And they could be anything you want them to be. So as we go through the 6 weeks till Christmas, next 8 weeks, as we go through the next 8 weeks together, let's just try to remember to be kind to ourselves. We are often kinder to other people than we are ourselves. And it's important. Try to put your judgment away. I know as a grieving mom, regret looks like guilt. I could have done this better. I could have done that better. I could have been a better person. I could have done this. I could have done that. Put it away for a while. Put it in a pretty little box. There's actually a technique I used today with this situation that I have going on in my work. I put all those worries and concerns in a Barbie doll box. Because, like the Barbie doll goes in the box and they have all that plastic around it and you can put the lid down on it. I figured that all the yapping, would just happen inside the box and it wouldn't get to me. That's what I did. But I don't have to think about it. It's all just in the box. You can do that too. You can put those people that you struggle with over the holidays, whether it's a family member, whether it's a coworker, put them in a box. And whatever box comes to mind is the box they're supposed to go in. Because who would have thought a Barbie doll box? But that's what came to my mind. Just put them in a box. And put all the feelings and all the thoughts and everything just in the box. And every time you have a new thought, put it in the box. And then you don't have to worry anymore. Because it's in the box. And when you're ready to pull it out, you can pull it back out of the box. Or not. I think I'm going to start a poll on Instagram. What is the worst thing that anyone has ever said to you about you? And then I'll do a podcast episode about it. So that's what we're going to do next week. What is the worst thing anybody's ever said to you about your grief? And what did you do about it? Nothing? Confront them? What'd you do? And I'll read them all next week. And hopefully I get some responses. Anyway, thanks for listening. As we begin this holiday season, remember, take care of yourself. Don't overcommit. Take a step back if you need to. And do self-care. Thanks for listening. I have Grieving Insomniacs Facebook, Grieving Insomniacs Instagram. I have a web page called A Healing Place for Grief. I have an email. If you don't want to be public about what the worst thing that was ever said to you about grief, or leave me a comment here on Spotify. Thanks for listening. This is Cristi Habermann signing off.